I play a lot of D&D, like a lot of it. But as a game, it has some problems. In today's video, we're going to go over the 10 rules I use to make my D&D games better. These come from years of experience as a DM. My players like them, I like them, and hopefully you'll like them too. And if you don't, you can always leave me a comment saying how awful they are. First up, Cardic Inspiration. I run difficult campaigns, so to make up for it, I use Cardic Inspiration. At the beginning of each session, I give my players a card face down. Then during the session, at any point after making a d20 roll, after they see the result, but before I know if it's a success or a failure, they can flip the card and add the result to their roll. Anything from 2 to 10 means that they add that number to the roll. So for example here, you add a 7. Jack, Queens and Kings also count as a plus 10, and an Ace is a natural 20. In addition, if I really like a roleplay moment by a player, or they do something epic during a session, then I will give them an extra card for the session. I'll also give you an additional one if you bake cookies for the session. Yes, I have a player who knows how to bribe me. There is one catch though. The deck also has 2 jokers. And those are not ones, just to keep things spicy. Death saving throws. When I DM, I tend to roll in the open most of the time, especially in combat. But there is one roll which I always hide. Death saving throws. They are rolled behind the DM screen. I find that it adds tension to the battle, as now players are much more hesitant to leave their allies unconscious because they might be failing all of their death saving throws and no one would know. I used to also let the player making the save see them, but I had a couple of times where their facial expressions betrayed the roll. So now it's just me. But if you have players with good poker faces, let them see it too. Very important for this rule to work. When I roll, I sometimes say, interesting, or just to add to the pressure. Knife theory. This one is more of a guideline than a hard rule. When starting a new campaign, I ask my players to make use of the knife theory. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it's from an old but incredibly popular Reddit post. I just realized while recording this video that this was posted 8 years ago. Oh my god, I'm old. It is, in my opinion, the best and most straightforward way to make a good backstory. A knife is essentially anything that the DM can use to raise the stakes of the situation for your character. Anything from a family member, to a secret your character has, to crimes you've committed in the past. So the more knives a player has, the easier it is for the DM to involve them directly in the story. For example, the party could be asked to rescue some people that disappeared in the desert. And all of a sudden, they learn that one of the missing persons is the fighter's long-lost brother. That's the DM using a knife to raise the stakes of the adventure and tie the character directly in the story. Insight checks. Hot take, I do not like insight checks in D&D. A lot of people treat insight checks like it is zone of truth, which it is not. It is just your gut instinct about something. But insight checks are the thing that get metagamed the most. For example, if a player rolls a 5 on their insight check, they won't believe what I say. But if they roll a 20 and I say the exact same thing, now they'll 100% believe what I'm saying. So the behavior of your character has changed because of the result appearing on the dice, which is not in the game. That is the definition of metagaming. And it's not because we have bad intentions, it's something we do subconsciously as players. So to fix that, we have a simple rule at our table. The DM rolls your insight check in secret, adds your bonus, and then tells you what your character feels. Now the number appearing on the die has no way of affecting how your character acts. You can of course choose to remain suspicious if that is the type of character you're playing, but that is not the dice determining that behavior. Losing limbs. In D&D, there's an optional rule called massive damage. The way it works is that when you take more than half your hit points maximum in damage, you must make a DC 15 con save or suffer the consequences of system shock, which range from disadvantage on attack rolls all the way to falling to 0 hit points and being unconscious. So, while I like the idea of massive damage causing pain to the characters, that table just felt too punishing, and dropping to 0 hit points would often lead to characters just dying. So, I changed it. Now, instead of a con save when you take massive damage, you make a con save. But instead of dropping to 0 hit points, on a failure, you lose a random limb, from a hand to a leg, and you start bleeding. Any magical healing stops the bleeding, but you gotta use regenerate if you want to grow the missing limb back. Said like this, it sounds harsh. but keep in mind that my campaigns make use of the rules in Steinhardt's Guide to the Eldritch Hunt, meaning that you can replace lost limbs with mechanical ones. It won't permanently cripple your character, it'll just take some gold and time to patch them up. And it leads to super cool moments in battle, where, for example, the fighter has his hand cut off, so he drops his shield, grabs his sword with one hand, and only fights with that and his massive pair of balls. Now, about that con save, you might be wondering what's the DC. You have two options, either DC 15, like the base rules, or how I like to do it, which is a DC equal to the CR of the creature. If you're fighting a black dragon, it's CR 14. So if the acid breath deals more than half your health, the DC is 14 for your arm not to melt. Not that hard of a DC. Now on the other hand, if you're fighting Tiamat, goddess of all dragons, ruler of the 9 hells, that's a 30 DC. Yes, it's almost impossible to succeed, but that's the point. It adds a layer of difficulty to the late game, where players are so strong that they are not far from gods themselves without destroying the early game balance. Madness. One of the problems of D&D is that it doesn't do Eldritch Horror very well. That was an issue for me because I love the idea of characters going insane when they see creatures from beyond the void, or use forbidden magic, or any other things that would break someone's mind. So to fix that, I make use of the optional madness rolls. When a mind-breaking event happens to a character, they have to roll on the madness table. But I don't use the base table from the DMG because that one is pretty bare bones. Instead, I use the madness table from Steinhardt's Guide to the Eldritch Hunt. There, madness is a condition. It causes you to become stunned until the start of your next turn. You must also roll a D100 and a D10, randomly selecting from various effects. It has a wide range from becoming afraid of your own shadow, to hearing whispers in your mind, to you turning into a monstrous creature. But sometimes the madness helps you. For example, if you revert to more feral instincts, you'll get advantage on dexterity saving throws. It just adds consequences for dealing with the occult, which is very useful to make the game darker. Resurrection. If you play by the rules, Resurrection makes the game way too easy past level 5. Any party with a cleric and some diamonds can bring back dead comrades. So to make death actually scary, I do a couple of things. After you die, when you're targeted by a resurrection spell, you roll a d20. On a roll of 10 or higher, you come back to life just fine. 9 or less, time to make a new character. And there's a second part to this. Every time you come back to life, the DC increases by 1. So, next time you die, you'll need to roll an 11 or higher to come back to life. And eventually, it'll be for your character to come back. Spell changes. Silvery Barb is certainly one of the spells of all time, and it is broken. Anytime I say that, the comment section catches fire, but this is a hill I'm willing to die on. By default, I used to ban the spell, but now with the 2024 version of the game, I allow it with one change. Let me explain the broken part of the spell first. Let's say you're a wizard and you target an enemy with Hold Monster. They have magic resistance, so they roll with advantage on the save and succeed. Now as a reaction, you cast Silvery Barbs, and you force them to roll a third dice, and now they have to pick the worst out of all 3 dice, which is likely to cause a failed save because you've just turned their advantage into a super disadvantage. And it basically allows you to recast your high level spell as a reaction because they remake the saving throw, but it only costs you a first level spell. This is insane! And on top of that, you give someone else advantage too. But now with the 2024 rules, that no longer works because you can only cast one spell with a spell slot per turn, so no action spell and then reaction spell. The only way to do this now is when your allies cast a spell, which is why I now allow it. But with one change, like I said. It's now a 3rd level spell instead of 1st level. Why 3rd level? Because even at 3rd level, the spell is so good that my players still use it. So it has no business being a 1st level spell. And speaking of 3rd level spells, another change I do in my games is that I still use the 2014 rules for counterspell. Psych! It might just be because I'm so used to them, but having to make a con save to resist a counterspell just feels wrong. I much prefer the contest of arcane might. Partial long rests. One of the reasons balance breaks in D&D is because players do not have the 6 to 8 encounters a day the book recommends. Instead, most of the time, players will have 1 to maybe 3 fights in a day and then go and get their long rest. This means that they never have to manage resources. Instead, they can just blast all of their spells in a single fight and call it a day. So to fix that, I introduced a new resting rule. Characters can only gain the full benefits of a long rest in safe areas. For example, a heavily guarded roadside inn or a safe town. Mechanically, it makes sense. You sleep much better at night knowing that you're not gonna get murdered in your sleep. So, if the party has to keep watch to sleep safely, then they get a partial long rest instead of a normal long rest. They don't gain exhaustion points, but they don't lose them either. They regain all of their short rest abilities, but not their long rest one, and casters only regain a partial amount of spell slots. This way, when the party is on the road traveling or exploring a dungeon, they still have to manage their resources and can't just rely on Leomund's tiny hut, because they will not recharge everything until the next save zone. Of all the rules in this video, this is the one that helps me the most with the balance of the game. It also helps bridge the martial caster power disparity, because martial characters function very well with short rests, but spellcasters do not. Rule of cool. This is my final and most important rule. If you want to do something, and it's really cool, but it's not supported by the rules, you can just tell me, and we can find a way to make it work together. For example, you want to combine your turn with the barbarian, so that he can throw you in the air, so that you can grapple the flying dragon. There's no rules for that, but it sounds awesome, so I'll allow it. It'll cost the barbarian his action, and he'll have to make an athletics check to throw you far enough, but I don't see why it can't work, so don't be afraid to bend the rules to have more fun. Arrivedere.